Bhopal, India is a city that's primarily known for the major gas leak that happened on December 3rd, 1984. On this day, in the early hours, at least 27 tons of MIC, or going to murder this word, I apologize, methyl isocyanate gas, leaked from a pesticide plant. In this video, I'm going to talk about what happened here, how it happened, why it happened, and then I'm going to talk about the after effects, the death toll, the injuries, the change in environmental thought process. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the legal proceedings, who got the blame, who ultimately had to pick up the tab for this. MIC was used in this pesticide plant as a chemical intermediate in the production of insecticides and herbicides. But when water was introduced into a storage tank, it caused a chemical reaction. And this chemical reaction caused the temperature to rise, which resulted in the buildup of pressure and ultimately the release of MIC. Normally, this isn't a problem because pesticide plants and plants in general have equipment in place and warning signals to, contain these gases and basically stop from polluting the environment around them. But the Bhopal plant had been falling behind. Many of their machinery, or excuse me, much of their machinery was deteriorating or shut off or broken. For instance, they had gauges for measuring the temperature and pressure of various parts of the unit that were broken. The refrigeration unit for keeping MIC at low temperatures was broken. The gas scrubber, which was designed to neutralize any escaping MIC, had been shut off for maintenance. The flare tower, which was designed to burn off MIC escaping from the scrubber, was also turned off because it too was broken. They were waiting for replacement for a corroded piece of pipe. The water curtain, which is designed to neutralize any remaining gas, was too short to reach the top of the flare tower, which is where the MIC was billowing. And there was no sort of effective warning system or any alarm on the storage tank. The MIC storage tank itself was filled beyond recommended capacity. To make matters worse, when the 27 tons of gas escaped into the air, the inversion and the low wind speed at the time didn't allow for dispersion. So basically, this gas made it about 8 kilometers downwind over the city of 900,000, and just sat there. One of my sources, which is actually the most helpful, and it's the first of my source links, said that eyewitnesses reported that a cloud of gas enveloped the area and moved slowly through the residential neighborhood. To give you an idea of just how bad it was for this gas to be sitting here in this one spot, the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration has a workplace standard of 0.02 ppm of MIC over an 8-hour workday. But the concentration experienced in Bhopal, India in 1984 was 1,400 times that of this standard. Also worth noting, when MIC hits a certain temperature, it forms a degraded version of MIC, and this version contains a more deadly hydrogen cyanide. While there was clear evidence that the temperatures had reached this level and that there was in fact hydrogen cyanide in the air at the time, the company who was running the plant at the time, which we'll get into later, said that there was no cyanide poisoning, even though many of the victims had cherry red bloodstains on them, which is indicative of a cyanide poisoning, and many people who were able to be treated to some degree at least were helped by the administration of sodium thiosulfate, which is an effective therapy for cyanide poisoning, but not MIC exposure. Levels of exposure to the MIC gas depend on 3 factors. 1. The distance of residents from the plant. 2. The duration of exposure. And 3. The activity during exposure. One of the things that made this gas leak exceptionally horrible was that MIC causes panic and disorientation. So when these people were first, I guess, exposed to this gas, they didn't understand what was happening and they left their homes panicked and disoriented, and this made the concentration worse. Determining the death toll is kind of tricky business because no one is quite sure how many people just left after this gas leak and didn't come back. But the leading government or Indian government records state that the gas leak immediately killed 3,800 people and caused a significant morbidity rate, I guess. But by 1994, the death toll was past 6,000, and the deaths and the morbidity are still a factor today. Pulmonary edema was the most probable cause of death in most cases, but many other deaths resulted from secondary respiratory infections. Many of the causes of morbidity included things like respiratory ailments such as chronic bronchitis and emphysema, gastrointestinal problems like hyperacidity, early cataracts, vision problems, neurological disorders such as memory and motor skill loss, psychiatric problems, including varying degrees of depression and anxiety, musculoskeletal problems, and reproductive problems. Despite all of this, the main company that owned this power plant, Union Carbide, which we'll get into again, claims that MIC is merely a mild throat and ear irritant. The Bhopal plant was owned and operated by Union Carbide India Limited, or UCIL. Now, this is an Indian company, but the Union Carbide Corporation, which received most of the blame, is an American company that owned just over half of the stock of this company. After the disaster, the UCC, the Union Carbide Corporation, tried to shift their blame to the UCIL. They also tried to fabricate stories that their plant had been sabotaged by extremists and disgruntled workers, but these claims fell apart pretty quickly. The incident happened on December 3rd, but by December 7th, American lawyers had already filed multi-billion-dollar lawsuits against the UCC. However, jurisdiction was shifted to the Indian court system as per the ruling of an American district court judge. Eventually, a settlement was reached with the Indian government through mediation and the Supreme Court of that country. The UCC finally had to accept moral responsibility, but they only ended up paying $470 million in compensation, which is a lot of money, but this company is a multi-billion-dollar company that killed, literally mass murdered what some estimates say are 20,000 people today. And that's just murder. That's not even accounting for the people that they left disabled. A major result of this gas leak was also the passing of the Bhopal Gas Leak Disaster Act in India. This was the government's way of ensuring that any sort of claims that arose from this accident would be dealt with speedily and fairly. Indians, though, were generally ignored by the court system, and through this act, the government was really their only representative. Personally is not a word we're allowed to use, so I'm not going to use it. I think that this is probably the reason their court system is so backed up today. In addition to this act, India also experienced a larger shift in thinking. People became generally more concerned with environmental activism. The disaster to the general Indian population indicated this idea that there needs to be an enforceable international standard for environmental safety, and the idea that they need to develop preventative strategies to avoid similar accidents and just generally have better industrial disaster preparedness.